or intros like I never got to like one of the prize ones like the Katie Sapphire, those were I never got to keep one of those, but I think I was one of the other, you know, they will dork and they are very fast, like I think, so that's why I think that was because they're for advanced keepers that when they to that when they like I kid if they got it loose, nope, they were gone. They are very gone fast. Like, nope, that's why I'm like, I'll keep them more silent ones right now until I put like, oh, you great shot, but they're there fast. Yeah, those combination is not a fun thing. That's why I was like, let me keep putting what's doing. That's what I was like, well, mark for like frogs and then I was like, that's kind of a little less, it's almost be well, like a little less stressful, but I imagine still there's still some stress involved with 7 and babies too. Yeah, well. It's just I love them. I mean, that could be what's Rachel says. Almost Rachel. I love like sometimes like nothing to do with game, but we'll get everyone.
Recording in progress.
Yeah, but everybody can everybody, it's all good in the they live on, they do, they play like that, like they like depending on the speech, I think like, especially they slowly grow with but like, or like the, just like traffic on those, they said they grow so slow, 20, at least 20 years, and they grow so slow, but at least the other one, they're so once you get the ID, like they're expensive. They're very expensive too. That's like, so that's kind of like I'll step back and I want to eventually I'll get back to it. I want to step back and I'll really the body like okay, so I'll be some things. Sometimes like at least that's about plans can be forgetting that some people dedicated like you, but they're not. They don't give us as much attitude as per se. Yeah. You have like property. So I wanted to.
So I'm gonna give you the chance to introduce yourself at the beginning. Or just maybe just give me a major interesting fact about yourself.
I don't have like I have some problems with like I tried over like I said. Sort of still very like I'm almost kind of 1 year into kind of getting all this like is very kind of stuff, but I used to do like a few biometric stuff or experiences like kind of make that out, but I'm trying to do the problem. Like I said, I'm really growing some here like in but I still I'll say I would try to propagate stuff. So I need to help with that one. I should be able to at least see if I can.
So I hate to break up a conversation about propagating anything.
You're good.
That sounds really interesting. But yeah, we got to get started, guys. So we're gonna get started here by first letting a couple of students introduce themselves. First, I'd like to introduce y'all to Anthony. Anthony's gonna tell us a little bit about himself.
Last semester recency for transfer. I don't know where, but I go to school for public health. Yeah.
Awesome, thank you.
Thank you.
Kelsey.
I want to get into the vet tech program here at ACC, and I saw that a lot of you are also doing that, so I think that's really interesting. But I'm with us.
Awesome. Do we by chance have a Bernadette in here? Bernadette, make it. Okay, maybe Bernadette will be here later. Oh, by the way, both of y'all are going to be 5s. Okay, so everybody's being assigned a number. So I got 2 more 5s here. All right. You're probably not on my roster, but you will be soon. Okay, yeah. Okay, so how many of y'all did some pre-class preparation stuff? Then y'all fill out the guided notes and read the chapter and stuff? Yeah, raise them high. Raise them high. Yeah. Okay, awesome. Awesome. Good stuff. Okay, keep that up. It's going to pay off dividends for sure moving forward. So if you didn't do it today, just make sure you do it before Wednesday. Don't do it Wednesday, make sure you do it eventually, because it's It's important. There's a reason why I have a before class things to do in here. Yes.
The homework quizzes, they didn't have like a due date on them.
Yeah, so they do have a due date. Yeah, everything has a due date in this class and it's on the schedule.
Okay.
So I think, so it's very important to understand, good point though, that the due dates are not going to appear on the activity screen on Blackboard, but they are going to appear on the course schedule. Everything's going to appear on there. And I have very specific reasons for that. And I need to do things that way. But if you ever want to come talk to me one-on-one, I can give you more information about why that's the case. Yeah, everything is in the schedule. Nothing's going to be on the activity stream on Blackboard. Okay. So it's not going to appear where stuff might appear for your other classes. But yeah, it looks like, yeah, you got it right there. That's the schedule. Yeah, do that. Yeah. So yeah, make sure, so yeah, chapter 1 and chapter 18.1 homework are not due yet, but they are due by this Sunday. Okay, everything's due on Sundays in here, or things are due on Wednesdays before you come to lab, because there's lab preparation things you need to do. So those are the times when things are due in here. All right. Okay, so we're kicking it off. Intro to biology. So we're going to cover a different few things today. But first of all, we're going to start off with just how do we get here? How do we exist in the current form that we exist in? And what came before us? There's quite a few things that happened to get to where we are today in the current form that we're in, and all the organisms that do exist on Earth currently. But it all started off with something very, very basic and simple. Very, very simple life that was just a single cell that came into existence through basically interactions of RNA and some very mysterious processes that are still being worked out. And maybe we'll never know for sure what happened back then, but we all basically come from a single cell. Everything that lives comes from a single cell. We've evolved and branched out to different life forms, and it took a long time for this to happen. It took, by most estimates, maybe 3.5 billion years or so to get from a single cell to something like us. It's a very, very kind of strange thing to think about. But there's lots of different organisms on the planet, and lots of organisms have existed on the planet before we even got here. And we're relatively new, like at least in our current form. We exist in a very, very, our existence is very, very new in the grand scheme of things. And so I'm going to start off with this video that can kind of show you the breakdown of how did we get through 4.5 billion years of the planet coming into existence and then us getting here. And this video is kind of cool because it breaks it down into how did all those things happen in a 24-hour clock, basically. So let's see if the audio works here. That's usually the issue.
Life. With an estimated 3.8 billion years of existence and evolution on Earth, it's an odd thing indeed. So how did we get here? And what would the Earth's 4.5 billion year timeline look like compressed into a normal day of 24 hours? The story begins early in the morning, around 4 a.m., with the rise of the first simple single-celled organisms. However, these organisms are destined to spend quite some time alone. At 1 p.m., a simple cell engulfs another, creating a symbiotic relationship and the first eukaryotic cells, or cells with internal organs. At 6:30 p.m., these cells begin to form colonies, and thus the first multicellular life develops. But it isn't until 8:30 p.m. that sea plants appear, and 20 minutes later, we suddenly see animal life erupt in an explosion of inventiveness. Jellyfish, the first true vertebrates, trilobites. Incredible diversification begins to take place. And just before 10 p.m., plants begin to appear on land, followed by land mammals. By 1024, the Earth is covered in carboniferous forests, and the first winged insects appear. Many reptiles dominate the land with less than an hour left, but a mass extinction event allows dinosaurs to storm the scene and remain until 11:41 p.m., when they too suddenly vanish. And so begins the age of man. In the last few minutes, apes split from the old world monkeys, and with only 1 minute and 17 seconds left before midnight, humans emerge. All of the recorded human history fits within a few seconds, an individual life lasting barely an instant. All a culmination of 3.8 billion years of
Life. I mean, I don't know. That video speaks for itself, I think, but that's pretty amazing if you just kind of think about it. I mean, we've been around for a minute, in the grand scheme of things. I like billions of years are kind of tough to imagine, but maybe a clock and a day. We've been around for a minute, just a minute. Wow.
Life.
Okay, but life is kind of this word that, I don't know, what is life? How do we know something's alive? We kind of have a sense of it, I think a lot of us, but how do we define life? That's what we want to try and attack today, at least a little bit of today. So here's the plants, toads, and kittens. I think we can all fairly be sure that all these things are alive up there, right? We all agree that those things are alive? Okay. What's a thing you can think of about those things? Some component of them that makes them alive? Can anybody think of something that makes these things alive? Just it doesn't have to be like something that's directly out of the lecture, but like what do you think of? What these things can do? Okay. I know we don't know each other yet. It's kind of what's that? Yeah, they all require some sorts of nutrients or food. Absolutely, yeah. They all produce ATP. Whoa, okay, nice. Jumping right in with ATP. What is ATP? Yeah, essentially energy. Awesome. Yeah, so all these things can make ATP. Yeah, are all these things made up of, what are the individual building blocks of these things, do you think? What are they made up of? Made up of cells, yeah. All these things are made up of cells. This toad's made up of cells, and this plant and these kittens. What can this plant do that the toad and the kittens can't? How's the plant different from these other guys? The plant can do photosynthesis. Yeah, what is photosynthesis? Dioxide, yeah.
Transforming it into glucose.
Yeah, okay, cool. Okay, yeah, basically taking carbon out of the air and taking light and sticking them together, and you make enough glucose out of it, make some sugars. Awesome. Okay. Yeah, so all these things are alive, but that's kind of what we want to learn today is how do we know these things are alive? So we're going to get to that in a little bit. So here's an example of some mice that live in Florida. Okay, so how do these organisms get to look the way that they do? That's kind of what we're going to just ponder for a second. We got a kind of a white looking sandy mouse up there, and we got this brown and kind of darker looking mouse. You might not know it from looking at them, but they're the same species of mouse, but they look different. Okay, they live in slightly different locations in Florida. You can see that some of these in this upper right-hand corner, some of them live next to the beach and some of them live a little bit more inland. So this is the result of evolution. These organisms looking the way that they do. And it's actually advantageous in some circumstances to kind of look like the environment that you're in if you're an organism out there in the wild. Okay. Has anyone ever thought about this before? Okay, so why do you think it's advantageous for the white and gray mouse to kind of look white and gray if it's living on the beach? Why do you think that might be good? To blend in with their environment. Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, I want to make sure that. So why is blending in useful though? Higher chance of survival. Won't get caught by predators. Okay, that's good. That's great. That's exactly what we're talking about here. And so the same thing's true for this brown one. It's probably going to blend better in this inland environment where it's a lot of the brush around there is kind of darker. Okay. So I mean, we have all this life that is the way that it is on the planet, but it got to be that way based on all sorts of changes that took place in the planet and subtle mutations that happened to the DNA of these organisms over the course of long stretches of time, right? Billions of years. And eventually you end up with things that kind of are adapted to their environment. It's kind of an amazing thing. Sometimes it works out great and sometimes it doesn't. But when it does work out, you have things that have special adaptations that allow them to survive and reproduce in a particular environment. Okay. So Biology. Biology is just the name of studying life, really. And so studying biology allows us to just kind of ask interesting questions. Like, how does a single cell develop into an organism? But there's not a very just straightforward one sentence answer to that kind of question. It's a conversation. There's lots to talk about. And also life. What is life exactly? Devise a simple one sentence definition. But we can talk about properties of life, and that's one of the things we're going to really hit on today, the properties of life and what are generally agreed upon properties that things have to have, embody, in order for them to be considered alive. Okay, so that's part of a big chunk of lecture today is going through the properties. Organization is a property of life. Reproduction, growth and development. Some of these you probably can just imagine exactly what they are just from, the word, but we're going to talk about each of them. Energy processing, response to the environment, regulation, and evolutionary adaptation. Okay. So for starters here, organization is a property of life. Okay, we have a picture of a toad for organization. So, I mean, I don't know how much y'all have thought about organization in terms of life before, but everything that's alive is built up of smaller things that build up bigger things and bigger things and bigger things and bigger things. And the smallest unit of life is what all of that sort of rests on. What is the smallest unit of life? Cell. Yeah, the cell is the smallest unit of life. Okay. The smallest unit of building material that's considered alive. What can you build with cells? You can build tissues. Yeah, there it is, tissues. My A&P student over here, gonna show off. Vegas is also on board. And then tissues make up organs and so forth. What's an organ that this toad probably has? What's an organ that toads probably have? Or a heart? Okay, yeah, they probably got a heart. Yeah, I think they got a heart in there, don't they? Makes sense. I have a heart too. You have a heart. What's another organ you can think of? A stomach? Okay, yeah, got to digest some food. Got to break down big macromolecules into smaller bits so you can get them into your cells and do things with them. Yeah, definitely.
Being fed like in captivity and then just trying to munch on the finger.
Is that what they do?
Sometimes when feeding, they'll
Uh-huh.
grab onto your finger.
Oh,
Yeah.
our finger.
Yeah.
Okay.
I just try-
Okay. I thought you were saying they're gonna eat
No,
eat their own fingers. I was like, wow, that's
I said in captivity.
okay. Gotcha. You did say in captivity. Okay. Yeah, I don't know if I haven't been in the situation where I've seen that before now. Okay. Okay. So I guess organs help build up organ systems. Can anybody think of an organ system? What's an organ system? Example of that? The endocrine system. Okay, that's a pretty cool one. Circulatory system. Okay, yeah. So what are some parts of the endocrine system? Hormones. Okay. Okay, yeah. Nice. That's okay. You're what's your name? Kate. Okay. Kate, what about besides hormones, what are some organs that might be part of the endocrine system? Okay, definitely. Glands, nice. Okay. That's good. That's pretty good. I mean, brain and glands, that makes up a lot of it. I know your name. Devin. Did you say circulatory system? What are some organs of the circulatory system? Okay, yeah. Blood vessels. Okay, yeah. That seems like pretty good. Is there I don't even know. Is there anything else? That sounds like about it to me. Okay. To extend bone. Okay. Oh, Corbin coming in here with the A&P. Yeah, you got it. Like true. Okay, awesome. Okay, I think we know what organs and organ systems are. Okay, so here's levels of biological organization put one way. So the truth about the levels of organization, we just have to be aware that the cell is the smallest unit of organization that is alive, right? But cells are built up of other things, right? Well, how do you build a cell? What do you need? What do you need to build a cell? What? Organelles, okay, organelles, the little organs inside cells. Yeah, we need those. What are organelles made up of? Molecules, okay, totally. Okay, so we got some molecules. And what are molecules made up of? Atoms, okay, solid. Okay, so I mean, atoms, molecules, organelles, are those alive? Nobody's gonna say depends on the organelle. Okay, yeah, I mean, generally speaking, no. What are some of the most common atoms that build up biological and organic material? Nitrogen, yeah, definitely. Nitrogen, okay, good. What else? Oxygen, totally. Carbon. Hydrogen, nice, okay. We got the notch there. Notch. Okay, I'm gonna reorganize these letters and give y'all a little trick that I like to remember when I'm thinking about the 4 most abundant elements in living organisms. Honk. I like honk. Honk, 1, 2, 3, 4. Does anybody know why I put the 1, 2, 3, 4 with honk? Anybody heard of this before? What is it? It's a good guess. Good guess. The reason I put those there is due to bonds. Do we know what bonds are? Okay. So basically nitrogen, sorry, I'm sorry. I like the notch, but we got to get rid of it in order to avoid confusing anybody. Okay. So hydrogen, under most all circumstances, only forms 1 bond. Oxygen, under almost all circumstances, forms 2 bonds. Nitrogen, how many bonds do you think it forms? 3 bonds. And carbon forms 4 bonds. Okay, so that's a fun little trick that will get you places. You'll find that useful at some point in your life, whether it's in this class or some other place. Okay. We're going to talk more about bonds next time. But I do want to just take a moment to say that if anybody feels a little bit like rusty on your chemistry, there's a lot of good resources in the folder, and you should use them all to prepare. If you're feeling a little bit like chemistry, I forget chemistry, come into the next lecture prepared to talk about that stuff, okay? Because chemistry is something we need to know about for this class. We need to be informed a little bit on chemistry before we dive into stuff later in order to make that stuff a little bit easier. Okay, so we got our honk 1, 2, 3, 4. We got our atoms, which make up molecules, which make up organelles and cells. Cells make up, what are these right here? Tissues, which make up, Devin. Organs, okay, which make up organ systems. What is this organ system, Devin? Circulatory system, which make up organisms. Okay. Pretty straightforward so far, right? Biology's easy. Super easy. Okay, and here's another depiction of the same general idea, but with a plant and with going up a little bit further beyond organs and organisms, going on to populations, where you have lots of organisms living together, and communities where you have different types of organisms living together, and ecosystems, which are a little bit larger and they contain other aspects of the environment. And finally, you got the biosphere. The biosphere. So what do y'all think? You think a life is only on planet Earth? There's other life out there? There's other life beyond the stars. Okay, we got some serious nods here. Got some nods. Okay. Yeah, I don't know. That would be so interesting if it turns out that life is just so unlikely and so rare that it just happened here. As far as we know, this is where it is. An interesting thing to ponder though. I don't know. I guess I don't really know. Who could know? Seems like probabilistically, it seems like there's got to be some more life out there, but who knows, you know? I don't know. Okay, so by now we know that the cell is the base level of organization that is considered alive. Okay, this is a cell. This is like, you know, it seems like all cells look like blobs. Cells look like all sorts of different kinds of things, but this is our generalized cell here. Okay. One thing that makes a cell is it is enclosed by a membrane. So there's sort of this border that goes around the whole thing, keeps the inside in, keeps the outside out. The membrane. Y'all know what the membrane's made up of? Somebody besides Kate, who knows what the membrane's made up of? What is it? What's it made up of? Oh, okay, yeah. So certain cells would have a cell wall. Absolutely, yeah, that's true. Typically, I think of like a plant cell as having a cell wall, and other organisms, other microbes do as well. But like, there's kind of this one molecule that forms this bilayer. Have you heard of the bilayer before? Okay. Phospholipids, yeah, phospholipids are what make up the cell membrane. Yeah. There's cell walls too. Yeah, that's also a thing, but this cell doesn't look to me like it has cell walls. But it might if we have more information. Okay. The other thing about cells is they use DNA as their genetic information. DNA is their genetic information. Okay, so this cell looks like has a big purple ball in the middle. That's probably the nucleus. That's where the DNA is. Okay. What is DNA? What is DNA? Kind of just this thing, right? DNA, this thing we hear about. Deoxyribonucleic acid. That's exactly what it is. Yes. So it's just like genetic information for like making stuff in cells, right? Okay. So like what kinds of things are we making with the information in DNA typically? Proteins and more cells. Yeah. So that both of those things, absolutely. Yeah. Typically I think of like proteins as like definitely true. But yeah, there's got to be a code for making more cells. You got to divide, you got to make more cells for all sorts of reasons. Yeah. Nice. Okay, so the types of cells that exist, they vary. There's lots of different types of cells. There's I think like 200 different cells in our bodies, types of cells. And the structure that those cells have is related to what their function is supposed to be. Okay. You have like really, really long cells in your nervous system, which are called neurons. You have other types of cells that are more like balls and cubes and other things like that. They all have sort of different structure, but that's related to their function. Okay. But this is true at all levels of biological organization, not just at the cellular level. It's true at an even larger level. So I think this is a pretty good example of how structure and function are correlated. We have this general shape of our arm. You know, we have a humerus bone and an ulna and a radius in our forearm. And we've got some carpals and metacarpals in our hands. And the structure of all of those put together in the arm of a human is designed to allow us to hurl a rock very precisely and accurately, you know, maybe like 50 yards and nail that tiger out there on the savannah. That's what we're really good at. Okay, knocking it out. So that's what humans are like the best at. You know, throwing rocks. So anybody who thinks you just can't play baseball or can't throw a pitch, we're all built to do it. Just a little bit of training. Just, you know, go to camp for a year, you'll be throwing a 90-mile-an-hour fastball. All of us can. But we also have other, you know, related organisms distantly related organisms like birds. They have similar analogous structures, but they have very different function because they're built a lot differently. The bird bone is hollow. So why do you think bird bones are hollow? They're not throwing stones, are they? What is it? So they don't weigh too much. They can, when they flap those things, they're gonna, take off and be able to kind of fly around and glide. Makes sense, okay. And then whales, they have similar homologous looking structures as well, but they're doing different things. They're just like that's cool. That's my whale. That's what I think whales do. Okay, so another property of life here is reproduction. I mean, I think we all have a general sense of what reproduction is, but in case we don't know exactly, with sexual reproducing organisms, there's got to be two different types of gametes that come together. One's a sperm and one's an egg. They come together, and then once they come together, Devin, what are they going to start doing? They're going to start dividing. They're going to start dividing, making lots of copies of that cell and diversifying. And every time they divide, basically turning off genes and turning on other genes, and eventually going to have a little baby. Because all sorts of different types of cells, one type of cell that you start off with, but eventually you end up with all these different types of cells and different types of tissues. And it's just an amazing thing. And all has to do with this DNA, turning things on and turning things off throughout several divisions and more divisions. And eventually you end up with different things starting to form, okay? But sexual reproduction is just one type of reproduction that we kind of think of. Asexual reproduction is also a thing. And that's just it's just when organisms straight up divide. They just split in half, So a lot of single-celled organisms do this kind of thing. A lot of single-celled organisms just divide. They make the copy of everything that's inside them and they divide. But also some other things that aren't single-cellular do this too, like this starfish. This is some kind of New Zealand starfish, and it just divides, kind of splits in half, and has these little tentacles on one side, and they kind of grow bigger. And yeah, so reproduction is a property of life. Okay. With respect to all that division, that's going to lead to growth and development. Okay, that's one very important reason why cells have to divide and divide and divide, is to grow and develop. And these little pandas, they're going to start off looking kind of small, but they do have very similar traits to their mother over here on the right. Okay, I mean, they're just smaller, really. So growing and developing, you have to do a lot of the cell division to get there. What is cell division? What's another name for cell? What's a biology word for cell division? Mitosis. Yes. Okay. So mitosis is going to get us over long stretches of time from little panda to bigger panda. And why in some larger sense do the little pandas look like the mother panda? Why is that? Yeah, they have similar genes. They have similar DNA, right? Yeah, they got the same. They're sharing some DNA. Got it. Okay. Has anyone heard of the central dogma of gene expression before? The central dogma. Sounds very serious. Okay. The belief system here. So basically it's just saying that DNA is the storage booklet for all the information for dividing and for protein making inside cells. But we can't use DNA by itself to make proteins. We have to convert it into something else first. Okay, we have to convert it from DNA into mRNA in a process called transcription. Okay. So I know everyone's here has heard of DNA before. You've all probably also all heard of mRNA before too, right? mRNA, because everyone's heard of the mRNA vaccine as of a few years ago. Okay, so that's it's the same kind of message, but it's a little bit different. Okay, so it has to be converted first, and then after the message is transcribed, it is going to be translated into a bunch of amino acids stuck together. Stick a bunch of amino acids together in a chain, you stick a bunch of them in together in a chain, they're going to fold and curl up in a weird, interesting way. And that way that they fold is going to give them, it's going to result in a protein. But the way that that protein folds is going to determine its function. Okay, so proteins are really abundant macromolecule in all organisms, and they have all sorts of different functions. But this one is called crystalline protein. And where do you find crystalline protein? Turns out you find it in your eyes. Turns out that's a protein that light can shine through really easily. And it's a very transparent protein that you find in your eyes. And that's just the kind of structure you want. You don't want something that's going to block light from coming into your eyes, basically. Okay, it has other properties, but basically it's just the kind of protein that you want to have in the lens cells of your eyes. Okay. So gene expression is just converting DNA into mRNA and then mRNA into protein. And the DNA being converted to mRNA is called transcription, and the mRNA being converted into proteins is called translation. Okay, we have, a whole unit that's going to go towards that later in the course. So I'm not going to spend really any more time on it now, but it's good to kind of have a general sense of where things are headed in here. Okay, another property of life is energy processing. Okay, so energy processing. Well, first of all, what is energy? What is energy? Oh, energy is just kind of this thing that we just kind of need, right? Kind of have and kind of need more of. What do you think energy is? Okay, yeah. Heat's a form of energy, absolutely, yeah. Okay, so some kind of essence that can do work, right? Something that can make things move. I shouldn't say essence, that's a weird way to put it. But yeah, heat energy is the type of energy, light energy is the type of energy. There's energy in the covalent bonds of molecules. Okay, there's energy in there. So yeah, processing energy means transferring energy from one place to another place, that one organism to another organism. It also means transforming the energy from one type of energy to another type of energy. Okay, so that's one thing that plants do really well, right, Kate? They do photosynthesis, right? They take that light coming from the sun, and then they convert that energy into what?
And they also provide oxygen as well.
Okay, yeah. So basically, that's basically right. Okay, yeah. So the plants, they're going to make glucose. It's just the light is energetic. It's light coming from the sun, and they can take the light and put it into glucose. What does that say about glucose? Glucose has a lot of energy in it too. Glucose is just vibrating with energy. Okay. So that's a really important thing. We want to just like hear glucose and think to ourselves, yeah, that's a very energetic molecule. There's lots of energy packed into glucose, right? So one thing we want to be aware of. Okay, but then organisms eat plants, right? So they're going to take that energy that's in the plant, the starches and the glucose, and that's going to convert that energy into another form of energy that allows this organism to kind of move around and stuff and just make other cellular processes take place inside themselves. So bugs eating it, there's more to talk about there, but that's generally energy transformations. We got light energy being converted into chemical energy, being converted into mechanical energy to make this thing move. Okay. And ATP, yeah, ATP is a part of all this. I've heard it a few times already today. ATP is a molecule that has energy packed inside it, basically, and it pops apart. And when it does that, it releases energy, and that energy can be used. Okay, we got a monkey. We got a monkey here. What's this monkey doing? It's eating, okay. Why is this monkey eating? To get energy. Yeah, I like that. This monkey's eating to get energy. totally. That's what this monkey's doing. That's what I did before class today. Did you do that today? It's one of the reasons I ate today for sure. I didn't do this today though. But this monkey's leaping from tree to tree. Why would this monkey be leaping from tree to tree? Escaping a predator. Yeah, that's a solid reason for leaping from tree to tree. So why? Yeah, it's up there in the air, right? It's not walking along the ground. That'd be a little bit more dangerous. Okay, I agree with that. Does anybody else have another reason why this monkey needs to leap from tree to tree? To travel? Yeah, just general getting around. Yeah. It's faster, yeah. It's faster for a monkey to travel like this. Better source of food, yeah. Better sources of food. Yeah, there's probably lots up there to explore. So it's gotta find the good stuff. All right. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Nice. Yeah. And like that monkey is probably much better adapted to swing from tree to tree than it is to walk on the ground, right? That probably uses up a lot of energy to walk around the ground. Not to mention be super dangerous. Man. Dang. Okay, good. So I'm glad the monkey's up there. Okay, so another property of life here. Responding to the environment. Okay, so everything that's alive responds in some form or fashion to the environment. Have you heard of a Venus flytrap before? Basically just wait for some bug to crawl in it and they just snap shut. So that's the environment. They're just a bug crawling on it's going to cause them to snap shut on the bug. Other weird plants like this one called the Mimosa pudica, it just kind of like droops when you touch it. I don't know. I never looked into why it does that, but that's kind of weird. And there's videos you can, if you want to, you can go online and watch that. Watch one of those guys just droop.
So just like in this would fly away.
Oh, really? Okay. That sounds like a good hypothesis. I like that. Or is that just is that the fact of the matter? Okay. Okay. Nice.
It's kind of as wild as us, and we just instantly move to scare it away. It's kind of the same concept.
Nice. All right. That's cool. Okay. Well, now I'm gonna stick that in my pocket and share that next semester for sure. Thank you. That makes a lot of sense. I like that. Okay. But I mean, what's another way that you can think of that you respond to your environment? How do you respond? What do you think, Larissa?
It's like getting bumps in your
Okay, yeah. Getting goosebumps when you're cold, all right. That's responding to your environment. Yeah. What else happens when you get really cold? Start to shiver, okay. Why do you shiver when you get really cold?
Being mentally keeping warm versus just staying still. But I remember I feel it's like part of the reason why you get tired when you get too cold. It's like to conserve energy. It's more energy to stay awake than it is to sleep. Like in terms of
Yeah, okay, absolutely. Yeah. So just the shivering is gonna just make your muscle, it's just contractions of your muscles, right? And you're not having to voluntarily do it. Your body says, okay, it's time to warm up, and that definitely contracting muscles is a way to heat your body up. So absolutely. So that's definitely what's going to happen when you get too cold. What happens when you get too hot? Start sweating. Okay. And how does that take care of bringing the temperature back down a little bit? Evaporation of the sweat. Evaporation of sweat definitely cools you down. Nice. So that's another way in which, you know, we're not Venus flytraps or this other weird plant. Okay, so another thing to talk about, another property of life is regulation. Okay, so you know, you could think about temperature regulation as regulation, because what we just talked about really is a form of regulation too. But there's also all sorts of things that need to be regulated in any organism all the time. And you just pick pick whatever you want, really. There's certain pH levels that your blood has to be at all times. There's certain levels of calcium that has to be, right at all times. Otherwise things get out of whack. And I mean, pick whatever you want, your blood pressure needs to be a certain level. blood sodium levels, et cetera, et cetera. And it is feedback mechanisms that allow for any particular variable in your blood to stay at that level that it's in. Okay. Or your blood pressure to stay where it is, or anything like that. If the thing gets too high, you need to bring it back down. If the thing gets too low, you got to bring it back up. Right. And that's basically what that is that's creating homeostasis, creating this steady state of conditions that keeps most things alive most of the time. Why is there a jackrabbit over here though? This is kind of a unique way that this particular organism regulates its body temperature. If it gets too hot out there in the desert, it funnels more blood and dilates blood vessels in its ears, and that's going to allow it to dissipate heat from its ears here. If that's how it cools itself down, because it can't sweat. Okay, it's not like other things that can sweat. Okay, so that's its special way. It's not like a dog that's going to pant. It's not like a human that's going to sweat. It's going to shoot all that blood up there into these dilated blood vessels and let that stuff dissipate. Okay, so there's two different types of feedback. There's negative feedback, which basically slows down a process or reverses what is taking place, so going in a certain direction. And then you have positive feedback, which is much more uncommon, much less common, where you get more of the same thing, self-reinforcing, speeding up a process. Okay. Does anybody know what an enzyme is?
Protein that acts as a catalyst.
That's true. That's true. Does anybody else know what an enzyme is? Okay, I'm gonna not use the enzyme example then, because I get the sense that at this point in the semester, we don't really know what enzymes are, but we will later. But thermoregulation is a perfect example of negative feedback. So thermoregulation is just temperature regulating. So that's just if your body gets too hot, cool it back down. Your body gets too cold, warm it back up. If this body gets too hot, there's mechanisms that are going to kick in to bring it back down. The body gets too cold, there's mechanisms that are going to kick in to bring it back up. So Larissa just told us about shivering and sweating. That's exactly what we're talking about here. Get too hot, bring it back down. Get too cold, bring it back up. Okay, so that's a negative feedback. Yeah, let's watch this video.
Negative feedback sounds like a bad thing, right? Well, actually, it's not bad at all. In fact, it's a very important process that occurs in our bodies all the time. But what does it actually do? What does negative feedback mean? It's all to do with homeostasis. Homeostasis maintains a constant internal environment so that important functions and processes in the body can be carried out properly. We looked at homeostasis in more detail in this video. Homeostasis stops us getting too hot or too cold and ensures we are breathing enough to bring in sufficient oxygen and maintains the salt levels within our bodies. Negative feedback is an important type of control that is found in homeostasis, keeping different values around a constant set point. It's a continuous cycle. Very simply put, you get too hot. Your body detects that it's hot. Your body turns on mechanisms to cool itself down. You cool down, the mechanisms are turned off again, and you're back to the start. It's called negative feedback because the stimulus, you being too hot, causes an opposite reaction by the body, so cooling you down.
Okay, so the stimulus and receptor and all that good stuff is more of an A&P thing, but the general idea is that you get too hot, it's going to bring you back down colder. If your blood calcium levels get too high, there's going to be mechanisms that kick in to bring them down to a lower level. And with everything, it's going to be like that. Positive feedback, on the other hand, is very uncommon, but there's some examples of it. Childbirth is a classic one. So here we have a little baby inside the uterus here. And this baby, maybe at 36 plus weeks is probably big enough to be born here. Okay, and what happens at this stage is the baby's head is going to press against the cervix. And when this happens, this is going to trigger contractions. Okay, this is going to trigger contractions, which is going to kind of push the baby towards the cervix and towards the birthing canal. Okay, and when the contraction happens that pushes the baby in that direction, it's going to put more pressure on the cervix. Okay, and putting more pressure on the cervix is going to cause contractions. Okay, but every time the pressure happens, every time the contraction happens, there's a release of oxytocin to stimulate more contractions. Okay, so it's just a self-reinforcing cycle of oxytocin being released to get the baby to push against the cervix. Baby pushed against the cervix, more oxytocin is released. Have y'all heard of oxytocin before? Maybe you've heard of it. Okay. And so, and sometimes when they're trying to induce labor in the hospital, they'll actually give the mother oxytocin. They'll give her a synthetic version of oxytocin to try and stimulate this kind of thing. Okay. It's just a cycle that's going to continue over and over and over again. Pressure, oxytocin release, more pressure, oxytocin release, more pressure, until eventually the baby is going to fit through the birthing canal and be born. And then after that point, there's nothing pushing on the cervix anymore. So this whole process kind of dampens down. There's nothing more to do here. Okay. So positive feedback. That's a classic example of positive feedback. Okay. So that got us through regulation, talking about different types of feedback there. Okay, so evolutionary adaptation is a property of life. And here we're looking at a beautiful white bird called a ptarmigan, which really blends in quite well in the Alaskan tundra. It gets really white when it's very snowy in the Alaskan tundra. And in the summertime when Alaska kind of warms up and doesn't look very snowy anymore, it kind of loses those white feathers and becomes more brown. Okay, so this bird can kind of do it all. And supposedly they're also very tasty. So I've only seen them on TV. I watched the show Life Below Zero. Has anybody heard of this before? Excellent show if you haven't heard of it. So y'all watch it. Who's your favorite character? Who's your favorite person? Okay, that's fine. You got one on the top of your head over here? Your favorite character? Okay. Okay, fair enough. Fair enough.
It's not like dad who had like 3 daughters or something.
Oh yeah, Chip, yeah.
But they were
Okay, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's fun to watch them. They're all I guess they're all part of the Inupiaq tribe. Yeah, that's a fun one to watch. Yeah, how they live up there. I'm just so fascinated with how people live in Alaska, so I'll watch that show all the time, as much as I can. I've not been to Alaska. Have you been to Alaska? You have been? Oh wow, okay.
Go and do all that.
Yeah. I don't think most people go and do all that. Yeah, that'd be crazy. But yeah, I'd love to go sometime or just experience it from TV. I don't know. Either way. Yeah, I like Rico DeWild. He's an Athabascan native, and he teaches his kids how to hunt, and they go out, and he has like 7 kids, and they're all very small, and just it's kind of adorable to watch them grow and become, I don't know, never mind. Okay, anyway, so the ptarmigan is very well adapted to live in Alaska because it has this double coat of feathers and it blends in really well. And it has this behavior that gets it to burrow in snowbanks. That seems like a smart thing to do if you don't want to be hunted. Okay, but people still get them because they're, people are people. All right, so that kind of gets us through our properties of life, but there's more to talk about. how exactly does evolution work? I mean, we've kind of been touching on it this whole time, sort of, and dancing around it. But what it really, this is a very direct and simplified way of putting it. If you have an environment that has a population with varied inherited traits, like all these little beetles, maybe some kind of ladybug here, there may be all sorts of different versions of that ladybug. There may be some light colored ones and dark colored ones and everything in between. But what happens over time is there's this selection. There's a selection process where the ones that get eaten are probably the ones that are going to be more visible to predators and easier to hunt. Okay, so over time, you get these ones get eaten up, and eventually the ones that are left over, they're going to be the ones that reproduce, right? That kind of makes sense that the ones that are left over, they're alive, so they're alive, they can reproduce. And so the ones that reproduce with each other, you're going to find them just being more abundant in the long run. You still have some of these little bit light colored ones, but they're more rare than the darker colored ones in this particular environment, right? And that could be any particular trait, could be any particular physical trait, could be any particular behavioral trait. This is just how evolution works in general. And we owe a lot of our understanding of evolution by the process of natural selection from this guy, Darwin. Has anybody heard of Charles Darwin before? Okay, yeah, pretty popular name. I had a guy named Darwin in my class one time. His name was Darwin. This made me excited. Anyway, Darwin, he traveled the world and saw a lot of things. Based on his observations traveling the world, it led him to realize why things change over time. I mean, everybody knew back in the 1800s, or people knew moving, from, probably for a long time that things change over time, that organisms change over time. But what they didn't really know is why and how they change over time. But Darwin, I mean, he was like 23 years old and he got on a boat and just said, okay, let's go around the world. What an adventurous young man. What a bold guy. I mean, I just, can you imagine not knowing when you're going to come home or if you're going to come home? You just kind of get on this ship and start going. I don't know if I could do it. I mean, I'd like to say I could. I'd go to Alaska, but I don't know if I could go around the world or not in a boat back in the 1800s. Man, they don't have any of the technology they have today. Yeah, well, I think they had some level of direction, but not.
I wouldn't say it's
Well, I mean, people made it, but yeah, not trustworthy enough for me. I agree with you on that. I agree with you on that. Yeah, they looked at the stars. They had devices. Anyway, Darwin went around the world and he found himself in South America. And if I remember correctly, some of the main observations he had in South America were just like seeing giant fossils or fossils of giant things that he saw currently alive, okay, that were in South America. Okay, so an example is like the Megatherium, which is a giant version of a sloth, like a huge, like, as tall as the ceiling in here. Like, have you seen a sloth on, Discovery Channel? Bear size, maybe bear size, okay, but bears can easily be like tall as the ceiling too. Yeah, bears, yeah. I don't know exactly the size, but we're talking big. What's that? Megatherium? No, they're not. Unless you know something I don't. But I mean, that's just an example. Giant sloths that were around that he saw fossils of. He saw giant fossils of turtles. He saw giant fossils of just, I don't know, the list goes on, big things. Okay. And but he also saw the current and present version of all those things in their smaller form. And so I guess he thought to himself, wow, there were some older things that used to exist that no longer exist, but there's smaller versions of all these things. So I think he just kind of got all this information, kind of sat on that and thought to himself, wow, I don't know what's going on yet, but something fishy is going on here. And then, he found himself in Ecuador around there, and somehow he made his way over to the Galapagos Islands, which is a very, when you think of Darwin, you probably think of the Galapagos Islands, or at least that's pretty much what we associate with Darwin in large part. He did a lot more than that, but The Galapagos Islands, if you haven't heard of them, it's like hundreds of small islands kind of peppered in this little area that's west of Ecuador out there in the Pacific Ocean. And they all have a slightly different ecosystem, slightly different environment. And they also have different types of birds that live on them that have way different looking beaks. Some of them have giant, like massive beaks that can chomp and break things really easily. And others have really delicate baby beaks that just can pick things up really easily and be very precise about what they're picking up, and everything in between. And so what he noticed was that some of the big beaked ones there didn't really have many insects to eat on those islands, but they did have lots of really hard seeds to crack open. That's how they're going to get energy there. Okay, so that was the type of beak that kind of persevered on those types of islands. And then you also have the other types of beaks where there's abundant insects to eat and not really so much these seeds to crack open. Okay, and then you guessed it, it's the kind of the more delicate tiny beak that gets the insects better. Okay, so he had these observations of things that used to be there and weren't there anymore, and observations of these finches and all their diversity, and just sat on that for a long time. And I guess we think is mainly because he was afraid of what the world would think of his observations and what his conclusions that he drew from all these things were, right? Everyone knew that things changed over time back in the 1800s when he came to this information, but and everyone knew about artificial selection. Everybody knew that you breed cattle with other cattle that can, both high milk producing cattle and have short legs so they can't jump over the fence, and just all sorts of things like this. Okay, these are just normal things that everybody was a farmer back then, lots of people were farmers. But then Darwin was making this leap to, oh, well, this same kind of thing happens on a grand scale, and it happens naturally for all organisms on the planet, and takes, in large part, lots of time to pass to happen. Some cases not. So he really believed that that he had a lot of evidence to present to the world about the theory of evolution as by natural selection to the world. Okay, but he didn't want to do it because he thought that he would be castigated for this and all the rest. But eventually, I guess maybe 20 years after he returned from his voyage, he did actually get home eventually. I didn't mention that. He did make it back to England. Somebody else was coming up with a similar story. Wallace, another guy named Wallace, who was doing research on butterflies in the Philippines. And so it's a cute story to go back and forth. Anyway, the main thing that happened at the end of all this is he did get the courage to release his book on the origin of species by means of natural selection. And in this book, he kind of opened it up with, he started with everybody, trying to bring everybody in, like, hey, y'all know this thing called artificial selection, how we breed our cattle, how we, breed plants with other plants to get the best producing plant and things like that. Well, other things work the same way, he said, he proposes. Okay, so this is what led to him, this is what he presented in his book, and this is what led to kind of a big idea at the time that we all kind of take for granted nowadays. Yes, Kate. How do we account for the original variance in traits?
There's multiple traits that are present, and then those are sifted through to the best one survives. But how did those multiple get there in the first place?
Right. Yeah. The best one sentence answer to that is by mutation. Mutation isn't always deterioration, but it does make interesting and weird things come into play. And if the mutation happens to be something that's really advantageous in an environment, then that mutation will flourish, and it'll become the new norm for that environment and for the species in that environment, really. Yeah. So that's I mean, you could have a whole class on, evolution, and I encourage you to take that too. And 1407, also, I'm assuming you're taking that after this. Okay. Dang, okay, well, you'll have an evolution class in college then, okay, yeah, you'll have a chance. But for anybody else, 1407 goes into that, and for anyone who's not gonna take 1407, 1309, which is a non-majors version of evolution, which goes into more of that stuff. And I teach it online over the summer. Take it from me. That might work for, anyway. Okay, so moving on. We got 18, okay, we're doing okay. This is the phylogenetic tree. It has some organism down here at the bottom, common ancestor, some undescript ancestor of everything. And then it has a bunch of branches that branch off of that. Okay, now you can have all sorts of different types of phylogenetic trees that show, small groups of organisms, or maybe all the different primates, or all the different types of beetles out there, or all the different dogs or cats or whatever you can think of. But you can also think of it in a very big, very, very big sense, okay? And this is the phylogenetic tree of life, the phylogenetic tree of life. So we're breaking down life into 3 categories. There's 3 categories of life. One of those categories is bacteria. Have you heard of bacteria before? Bacteria, they're like bad, right? They're on stuff, and they're like dangerous to touch and stuff. I don't think so either. I wanted to evoke something. Okay, so please tell me more about that. I wouldn't say they're all bad either. What are some good bacteria?
I don't know the exact names, but I know you have certain bacteria in their stomach that digest their food.
Absolutely, yes. So the very, very rich microflora in our gut that is very important to our general health. Probiotics, you heard of probiotics before? Yeah, it's basically what you're taking when you take probiotics. When you're eating yogurt, trying to get a good colony down there. Okay, so they can help break down some of the fibers and things that you take in that you're not going to break down on your own in your stomach. So very, very important. But yeah, bacteria kind of get a bad rap, but there's lots of great ones, lots of really important ones too. One thing that's true about bacteria is they're all single cellular organisms. So they're all one cell. Okay. So this thing is all these guys, all these branches of life here, which there are lots of types of bacteria. Bacteria is a very, very diverse category of life. One cell. Okay. What about archaea? Has anybody heard of archaeans before? It's another category of life. So archaeans are also one-celled organisms. They're single cell, so they're just one cell. They kind of get this reputation for being very hardy and can survive in really extreme environments, like very, very weird places where life probably shouldn't survive for the most part. So like at the bottom of the ocean next to a hydrothermal vent where it's very hot, there's lots of gases being released, and this doesn't sound like a happy place to live. Or in a very, very cold place, or a very, very salty lake, like the saltiest lake you can imagine. These are where archaeans live. Okay. And then we have eukarya. Have you heard of eukaryotes before? Okay. Eukaryotes can be single-celled organisms. They can be one cell, but they can also be multi-cell. Multi-cell organisms as well. Okay, so most of them are multicellular. I guess I don't want to say most of them, but most of them that we think about when we think about eukaryotes are multicellular. So plants are eukaryotes, right? Fungi are eukaryotes. Does anybody know what a fungus is? Okay, maybe a mushroom would be an example of a fungus. Okay. Animals. Eukaryote right here. Eukaryote. Yeah. Eukaryote for life. Not playing, yeah. So those are the multicellular ones, right? But there's also others that aren't multicellular, and those are called protists. Protists, okay. We'll talk more about that kind of stuff later after the first unit's over, we'll talk more about that kind of stuff. But for now, the three categories of life are actually the three domains of life. Okay, we do want to know that word, three domains of life. Three domains: bacteria, archaea, and eukarya. And one of the major differences between eukarya and the bacteria and archaeans is that eukaryotes have membrane-bound organelles in their cells. Membrane-bound organelles. Oops. Okay. So sometimes I just think of like eukaryotes have a nucleus in all their cells. They got other things too, but that's kind of like a good place to start. They got a nucleus in there. Okay. I think if we had more time, I'd use this time to review the properties of life, but we're going to keep going. Keep going. All right, so when we talk about the domains of life, that's just like the broadest category to categorize all of life. But there's all sorts of other steps in between that: kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. And for this class, I don't care if you remember all those, except for two of those. I do care if you remember two of them, and that is the genus and the species. The genus and the species. Okay. So genus and species gives us the binomial classification or the scientific name of any organism. So let me ask you this. What are you? What is your binomial classification? Homo sapien, yeah, Homo sapiens. We are Homo is our genus, and sapien is our species. Okay. I mean, you'd want to write it in the opposite order there, but so like Homo sapien, Homo first. Yep. And so here's some other examples of organisms that exist: the genus and species. Paragonymous westermanni, that's the genus, and the species. Saccharomyces cerevisiae. Have you heard of baker's yeast or brewer's yeast before? Does anybody like baking bread or using those yeast for anything, brewing beer, any of that kind of stuff? Okay, so just the, if you ever see something that's italicized in a textbook or in an article, more than likely is going to be, if it's two words and the first word's capitalized, more than likely it's going to be just the scientific name of some organism. Okay, and the rules of binomial nomenclature are important for you to know. First of all, the name must be italicized. If it's handwritten, you got to underline it. So that's the caveat there. The genus must be capitalized. So the H is always going to be capitalized in Homo or in Paragonymous or in Saccharomyces. The species is always going to be lowercase, sapien or cerevisiae or westermanni in the examples on the previous page. The other thing, and that's basically it. Those are the rules. Okay. The other thing is that you can, if you want to, instead of writing out Homo, you can just write H period. H period. So it's like H period sapien. Everybody knows what the H stands for in that instance. Okay. Okay. So that's what we got for how to name, the way you have to show your naming of something. Genus and species. Okay, we're going to finish up here talking about a few other little things here. So there's two different types of science that we can do. Generally speaking, there's discovery science. And when I think of discovery science, we're thinking more about inductive reasoning, generally speaking, if you read more in the textbook on that. Kind of observing and then analyzing data. And then there's also hypothesis-based science, which is more, I guess, more what we think of when we think about the scientific method for the most part. Okay, so we observe the world, we kind of think that there might be some kind of correlation between different things, and we we kind of have a hypothesis about what thing might be true based on those observations. And those hypothetical explanations that we come up with are called hypotheses. Okay, so we're going to go through a brilliant example of a desk lamp working or not working. So we observe that the desk lamp doesn't work. We might ask ourselves a question. Why doesn't the desk lamp work? Hypothesis 1, bulb improperly screwed in. I don't know, maybe we'll just go with that. We have to make a prediction that reinstalling the bulb will fix the problem. Okay, so predicting that. So that seems like a good way, something you can test. If we reinstall the bulb, that will fix the problem. Now I have to test that. What do you think the test is going to be of that? Reinstalling the bulb, right? We're going to reinstall the bulb. And then we're going to know. Result. What's the result? The desk lamp still doesn't work. Okay, so the hypothesis is not supported. So this is I think I need to come up with a better example than this, but for now, this is what I have. Hypothesis number 2, the bulb is burnt out. That just sounds like that's probably going to be true. That just sounds more likely to me in my experience. Prediction that maybe replacing the bulb will fix the problem. And the test of this prediction would be replacing the bulb. Result, the lamp works. Hypothesis is supported. Yes. Cheers. Okay, so we have to have a hypothesis that is testable. We can't, for example, test whether or not the ghost's fooled with the lamp. And we can't also comment on supernatural explanations because those are just outside the bounds of what we can do with a hypothesis testing. Okay, so those are questions that science can't address. And at the very end here, just sort of a total, 180-degree turn here, but something we need to be aware of before class next time is that data can be recorded in 2 different forms. Data falls into these categories of qualitative. Qualitative data is something you can describe, but you can't count, basically. Okay, so this car is purple is a qualitative statement. It has a quality to it. Qual. Okay. The car is purple. The weather is cold. The students are happy. The sky is blue. Blowing my mind here. Sky is blue. Yeah. Excellent. Yeah. So those are qualitative statements. But a quantitative statement might be the car has 4 windows or has whatever number window. It has 4 wheels. Let's go with that. The temperature outside is 40. We have some number. We can say what it is. 40 degrees. But between those types of things, some of those things you can count, other things you can't. Okay, so discrete data are things that you can count. Okay, there are 23 students in the classroom. Just guessing, but that sounds about right. Okay, so I could count everyone up. There's a certain number of hairs on my head. Okay, I don't know how many, but there's some number that I could actually count if I needed to. Okay. However, the temperature outside is a continuous variable. And, if it's 40 out there, I don't know if it's exactly 40 degrees. And I'll never know if it's exactly 40 degrees. Okay. Could be 40 degrees, 0.00223598. And there's just no way I could know exactly the temperature outside. Another example of that would be, I can't know exactly how much this stylus weighs. I might put it on a scale and find out that it weighs 10 grams or something like that. Okay, but it just depends on the device you have in front of you, how precise you can be with something like that. Okay, it might measure out to 2 decimal places. And after that, I don't know exactly how much it weighs. The length of the hair on my head. Yeah, maybe it's like a millimeter. I don't know. but it's not, there's not an exact length of my hair. It could be a millimeter 0.00000513 millimeters, but it goes down to infinity is the point. There's no exact number there. And this is the way I kind of think about continuous and discrete. It's a thing that I struggle to explain in some sense. But you kind of get a feel for it after you think about it. It's things that can be measured and things that can be counted is what the difference is between continuous and discrete. A percent? No, a percent would be continuous too. Wait, I'm sorry, quantitative, oh, it would be quantitative, yeah. It would be quantitative, yes. Yeah. Well, it depends what we're talking about, I guess. If we're talking about percent of a color or something, I think, but I think generally speaking, a percent would be quantitative in almost all instances, yeah. Yeah. Okay, and there's a tempting video to watch here.
Discrete data is data that has distinguishable spaces between the values. Often it is data that is counted. On a graph, the ordered pairs are at specific locations, so the graph is not connected, but only points. Some examples of discrete data would be the number of dogs, number of people, the number of tickets that you have for a show. Continuous data is data that falls on a continuum. On a graph, it includes all the points and the points in between. It also is data that can be measured as finely as possible. It is often a physical measuring and will include fractions and decimals. Some examples of continuous data would be time, age, height, and weight. Let's look at two examples and see the difference between these two types of data. Let's talk about your family. With your family, the family members would be discrete because you have 5 family members. The continuous data is that they range in height between 5 feet and 6 feet. Next, let's talk about books. Books on your bookshelf. The discrete data would be you have exactly 6 books. The continuous data would be the books range from 15 to 30 centimeters in length. Next, let's look at discrete or continuous. The number of cows on a farm. Yes, that would be discrete. The age of the cows on the farm. That would be continuous. The number of points scored in a game. Discrete. The amount of oxygen found in the atmosphere. That would be continuous. The temperature outside. That would be continuous. The number of text messages you sent today. That would be discrete.
Okay. I disagree with one of those, but I'll just set that aside for now. So a couple things I want to mention before we part ways today. One is that there's 3 things you need to make sure you do before Wednesday, but actually 4 things. Not 3 this time, 4. Okay, so the 3 normal things are the pre-lab your turns, the flow chart of the procedure, and the pre-lab quiz. The 4th thing is making sure that you have lab safety goggles with you with a Z87 certification, and also bring your closed-toed shoes. That shouldn't be a problem, I don't think, because it's cold outside, but make sure you're wearing closed-toed shoes. I'm going to be sending right after class out the SI survey. So Leo sent this out, your supplemental instructor for this class sent that out last week, but we didn't get that many responses, even though I'm incentivizing with bonus points. Thank you for doing it to those of you that have done it. But even if you don't think you're going to attend SI this semester, do it anyway, get a few bonus points. You're helping us all out. I'm going to be sending that out right after class just to remind everybody. You can go back and find the link anyway if you want to do that right away. And then the last thing I want to mention is the orientation assignment, okay? not everybody did the orientation assignment, and I sent some emails out today. So if you haven't done it all, I don't know what parts you haven't done. I just went through real quick and I saw who hadn't done all of it, and I sent you an email, okay? If you want to come up to me after class and figure out which parts you hadn't done, I can tell you right now, but in general, I'm not going to go look around and find those kind of things. Just go back to the list, check off all the things, make sure you did all the things. If you didn't do them all, do all the things. Okay, so just please do them as soon as possible. And by the way, as you're walking out of class today, think about who you might want to be working with for your semester project. Okay, you see anybody next to you want to work with, and start having that conversation, get it started. And I'll also prepare for lecture on Wednesday. Keep it going, keep your streak going. Okay. All right, good. We'll see y'all on Wednesday. Goodbye. Yes.
Speak for yourself. I try to get help.